Welcome to the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube. This is our Awakening Together weekly gathering. Each and every week we have a different minister who speaks. If you'd like to attend our services live, please visit our website awakening-together.org. Click on Online Sanctuary on the main menu. Then, How to Enter the Sanctuary. Our services are held Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary.
Good morning, everybody. Happy 4th of July. I'm really glad to be here with you. And Friday. Glad to see everybody here. Now we're going to talk a little bit about our statement of purpose and our core values. So what is Awakening Together? Awakening Together is a universal assembly of peers dedicated to recognizing and embracing universal wisdom, regardless of the form in which it appears. We're also dedicated to the recognizing the ways we deny universal wisdom by adopting personal beliefs and biases. And we want to recognize these limitations so we can free ourselves from them and open to the continuous flow of universal wisdom. We are an assembly of equals, joined in common purpose, awakening to one true self, within an appearance of many faiths, many cultures, and many symbols. We seek to discern one truth and to rest in its embrace. And the core value that I selected for today is number 4. Number 4. So we affirm one true self, which is we affirm one true self as the only truth. And we live this value by embracing what is helpful on the path of awakening without idolizing any spiritual doctrine as truth. So we're open to all teachings to see what it has to offer us. And so that's our core value that will be highlighted today. Okay, settle down into a little prayer. Dear Father, we thank you for this time together. We can come together, join with you in love. And we know we are free. We are given freedom. Sometimes we use our freedom to separate ourselves from you, as opposed to using our freedom to join with you. In this space today, may we find our way to move through the blocks. May we be released from the bondage of the ego when we identify with that as who we are. May we remember that we are free with you, free in our love, free to choose to remember who we are. May we do that today. Amen. All righty. So, Michelle is going to read for us. Thank you so much, Michelle. This is a article from Pema Chodron. I initially had gotten an audiobook of hers. This is quite a while ago, years ago. And I heard this teaching on there. And it really resonated with me. And then I stumbled upon it in an article form. And so I thought it would be a great great thing to visit about today. You can find, I pulled this article. I was going to post the site in the chat, but I didn't get that done. So it's Lion's Roar is the website, and there are just tons of, it certainly is a Buddhist website, but it has some incredible stuff there. So this one is called How We Get Hooked and How We Get Unhooked, article by Pema Chodron. And Michelle, you are on.
All right. I love Pema Chodron. She is awesome. Okay, so I'm going to pull up. I'm assuming I can be heard well. And let me know if I can't, or if there's any issues. Okay. How We Get Hooked and How We Get Unhooked by Pema Chodron, December 26, 2017. You're trying to make a point with a coworker or your partner. At one moment, her face is open, she's listening, and at the next, her eyes cloud over or her jaw tenses. What is it that you're seeing? Someone criticizes you. They criticize your work or your appearance or your child. At moments like that, what is it you feel? Is it a familiar taste in your mouth? It is a familiar smell. Once you begin to notice it, you will feel this experience has been happening forever. The Tibetan word for this is shimpa. It is usually translated as attachment, but a more descriptive translation might be hooked. When shimpa hooks us, we're likely to get stuck. We could call shimpa that sticky feeling. It's an everyday experience. Even a spot on your new sweater can take you there. At the subtlest level, we feel a tightening, a tensing, and a sense of closing down. Then we feel a sense of withdrawing, not wanting to be where we are. That's the hook quality. That tight feeling has the power to hook us into self-denigration, blame, anger, jealousy, and other emotions which lead to words and actions that end up poisoning us. Remember the fairy tale in which the toad hops out of the princess's mouth. Whenever she starts to say mean words, I'm going to say that again. Remember the fairy tale in which toads hop out of the princess's mouth whenever she starts to say mean words? That's how being hooked can feel. Yet we don't stop. We can't stop because we're in the habit of associating whatever we're doing with relief from our own discomfort. This is the shimpa syndrome. The word attachment doesn't quite translate what's happening. It's a quality of experience that's not necessary to describe, but which everyone knows well. Shimpa is usually involuntary, and it gets right to the root of why we suffer. Someone looks at us in a certain way, or we hear a certain song, we smell a certain smell, we walk into a certain room, and boom, that feeling has nothing to do with the present. Nevertheless, there it is. Shimpa thrives on the underlying insecurity of living in a world that is always changing. We experience this insecurity as a background of slight unease or restlessness. We all want some kind of relief from that unease, so we turn to what we enjoy: food, alcohol, drugs, sex, working, or shopping. In moderation, what we enjoy might be very delightful. We can appreciate its taste and its presence in our life. But when we empower it with the idea that it will bring us comfort, that it will remove our unease, we get hooked. So, we could also call shimpa the urge to smoke that cigarette, to overeat, to have another drink, to indulge our addiction, whatever it is. Sometimes Shimpa is so strong, we're willing to die getting the short-term symptomatic relief. The momentum behind the urge is so strong that we never pull out of the habitual pattern of turning to poison for comfort. It doesn't necessarily have to involve a substance. It can be saying mean things or approaching everything with a critical mind. That's the major hook. Something triggers an old pattern we'd rather not feel, and we tighten up and hook into criticizing or complaining. It gives us a puffed up satisfaction and a feeling of control that provides short-term relief from uneasiness. Those of us with strong addictions know that working with habitual patterns begins with the willingness to fully acknowledge our urge and then the willingness not to act on it. This business of not acting out is called refraining. Traditionally, it's called renunciation. When we renounce or refrain from, what we renounce or refrain from isn't food, sex, work, or relationships per se. We renounce and refrain from the Shimpa. When we talk about refraining from the Shimpa, we're not talking about trying to cast it out. We're talking about trying to see the Shimpa clearly and experiencing it. If we can see Shimpa, just as we're starting to close down, when we feel the tightening, there's the possibility of catching the urge to do the habitual thing and not doing it. Without meditation practice, this is almost impossible to do. Generally speaking, we don't catch the tightening until we've indulged the urge to scratch our itch in some habitual way. And unless we equate refraining with loving kindness and friendliness towards ourselves, refraining feels like putting on a straitjacket. We struggle against it. The Tibetan word for renunciation is shinla, which means turning Shimpa upside down, shaking it up. When we feel the tightening, somehow we have to know how to open up the space without getting hooked into our habitual pattern. In practicing with Shimpa, first we try to recognize it. The best place to do this is on the meditation cushion. Sitting practice teaches us how to open and relax to whatever arises without picking and choosing. It teaches us to experience the uneasiness and the urge fully and to interrupt the momentum that usually follows. We do this by not following after the thoughts and learning to come back to the present moment. We learn to stay with the uneasiness, the tightening, the itch of Shimpa. We train in sitting still with our desire to scratch. This is how we learn to stop the chain reaction of habitual patterns that otherwise will rule our lives. This is how we weaken the patterns that keep us hooked into discomfort that we mistake as comfort. We label the spin-off thinking and return to the present moment. Yet even in meditation, we experience Shimpa. Let's say, for example, that in meditation you felt settled and open. Thoughts came and they went, but they didn't hook you. They were like clouds in the sky that dissolved when you acknowledged them. You were able to return to the moment without a sense of struggle. Afterwards, you're hooked on that very pleasant experience. I did it right. I got it right. That's how it should always be. That's the model. Getting caught like that builds arrogance, and conversely, it builds clarity, because your next session is nothing like that. In fact, your bad session is even worse now because you're hooked on the good one. You sat there and you were discursive. You were obsessing about something at home, at work. You worried and you fretted. You got caught up in fear. Sorry, just a second. I just lost my place. Okay, got caught up in fear. Okay. All right. Pause. Okay. You got caught up in fear or anger. At the end of the session, you feel discouraged. It was bad, and there's only you to blame. Is there something inherently wrong or right with either meditation experience? Only the Shimpa. The Shimpa we feel toward good meditation hooks us into how it's supposed to be and what sets us up for Shimpa towards how it's not supposed to be. Yet the meditation is just what it is. We get caught in our idea of it. That's Shimpa. That stickiness is the root Shimpa. We call it ego clinging or self-absorption. When we're hooked on the idea of good experience, self-absorption gets stronger. When we're hooked on the idea of bad experience, self-absorption gets stronger. This is why we as practitioners are taught not to judge ourselves and not get caught in good or bad. What we really need to do is address things just as they are. Learning to recognize Shimpa teaches us the meaning of not being attached to the world. Not being attached has nothing to do with this world. It has to do with Shimpa, being hooked by what we associate with comfort. All we're trying to do is to not feel our uneasiness. But when we do this, we never get to the root of practice. The root is experiencing the itch as well as the urge to scratch and then not acting on it. We're taught whatever arises is fresh. The essence of realization. That's the basic view. But how do we see whatever arises as the essence of realization when the fact of the matter is we have work to do? The key is to look into Shimpa. The work we have to do is about coming to know what we're tensing or hooked or all worked up. That's the essence of realization. The earlier we catch it, the easier Shimpa is to work with. But when catching it, when we're already all worked up, but even catching it when we're already worked up, sometimes we have to go through the whole cycle, even though we see what we're doing. The urge is so strong that the hook is so sharp, the habitual pattern is so sticky, there are times when we can't do anything about it. There's something we can do after the fact, however. We can go sit on the meditation cushion and rerun the story. Maybe we start with remembering that all worked up feeling and getting in touch with that. We look clearly at the Shimpa in retrospect. This is very helpful. It's also helpful to see Shimpa arising in little ways where the hook is not so sharp. Buddhists are talking about Shimpa when they say, don't get caught in the content. Observe the underlying quality, the clinging, the desire, the attachment. Sitting meditation teaches us how to see that tangent before we go off on it. It basically comes down to the instruction, label it thinking, to train this on the cushion. While it's relatively easy and pleasant to do, is how we can prepare ourselves to stay when we get all worked up. When we can train in seeing Shimpa wherever we are, say something to another person and maybe we feel that tensing rather than getting caught in a storyline about how right you are or how wrong you are. Take it as an opportunity to be present with the hooked quality. Use it as an opportunity to stay with tightness without acting on it. Let that training be your base. You can also practice recognizing Shimpa out in nature, practicing sitting and catching the moment when you pose down, or practice in a crowd, watching one person at a time, When you're silent, what hooks you is mental dialogue. You talk to yourself about badness or goodness, me bad or they bad, this right or that wrong. Just to see this is a practice. You will be intrigued by how you'll involuntarily shut down and get hooked one way or another. Just keep labeling those thoughts. Come back to the immediacy of the feeling, and that's how not to follow the chain reaction. Once we're aware of Shimpa, we begin to notice it in other people. We see them shutting down. We see that they've been hooked and that nothing is going to get through to them now. At that moment, we have jhana. That basic intelligence comes through when we're not caught up in escaping from our own unease. With prajna, we can see what's happening with others. We can see when they've been hooked. We can give the situation some space. One way to do that is by opening up space on the spot through meditation. Be quiet, place your mind on your breath, hold your mind in place with great openness and curiosity toward the other person. Asking a question is another way of creating space around that sticky feeling. So is postponing your discussion to another time. Since no one particularly likes to have this Shimpa pointed out, people at the Abbey make deals like, when you see me getting hooked, just pull your earlobe. And if I see you getting hooked, I'll do the same. And if you see it in yourself, and I'm not picking up on it, or at least some little sign. Sorry, got lost again. Okay, or you see it in yourself and I'm not picking up on it, or at least give some little sign that maybe this isn't the time to continue this discussion. This is how we help each other cultivate progeny. Clear seeing. We should think of this whole process in terms of 4 R's. Recognizing the Shimpa, refraining from scratching, relaxing into the underlying urge to scratch, and then resolving to continue to interrupt your habitual pattern like this for the rest of your lives. What do you do when you don't do the habitual thing? You're left with the urge. That's how you become more in touch with the craving and the wanting to move away. You learn to relax with it. And then you resolve to keep practicing this way. Working with Shimpa softens us up. Once we see how we get hooked and how we get swept along by the momentum, there's no way to be arrogant. The trick is to keep seeing. Don't let the softening and humility turn into self-denigration. That's just another hook, because we've been strengthening the whole habituated situation for a long, long time. We can't expect to undo it overnight. It's not a one-shot deal. It takes loving kindness to recognize. It takes practice to refrain. It takes willingness to relax. It takes determination to keep training this way. It helps to remember that we may experience 2 billion kinds of itches, 7 quadrillion types of scratching, but there's really only one root, Shimpa, ego clinging. We experience it as tightening and self-absorption. It has degrees of intensity. The branch Shimpas are different styles of scratching that itch. I recently saw a cartoon of 3 fish swimming around a hook. One fish is saying to the other, the secret is non-attachment. That's a Shimpa cartoon. The secret is don't bite that hook. If we can catch ourselves at that place where the urge to bite is strong, we can at least get a bigger perspective on what's happening. As we practice this way, we gain confidence in our own wisdom. It begins to guide us toward the fundamental aspect of our being: spaciousness, warmth, and spontaneity.
Thank you, Michelle. I know that was a long one. I really appreciate you reading that for me. And I apologize. I had cut it down a little bit and obviously saved both of them. And so then when I went to send it, I sent the one that I had failed to cut back a little bit, but it's for a purpose. It's for a reason, right? So it's all there. So appreciate it. It was very good stuff. So I love this teaching. I think it does speak to me with my addiction background. So I'll probably talk a little bit about recovery and how that played out in my experience for sure, because it really does talk to that pretty clearly. But it's just a nice reminder about getting in touch with what it is that we keep showing up for, right? We keep showing up to awakening together, following this desire to be free. And, you know, sometimes we ask that question again, what is it that I'm wanting to be free from? And I think that this teaching does talk, you know, directly to the heart of that it is that it's certainly that sense of separation that we want healed, that sense of being isolated and alone. And what the Shempa addresses, I think, is that gap of time when we feel discomfort, when we feel the separation, and then we reach for something to calm that down. When we reach for the habitual response that's going to bring us some comfort. So it's our unwillingness to stay in the ick, probably is how I would describe that. The unwillingness to sit still, to stay in the room, right? And the room is in our own heads, probably, in our own self. And the way that that way that Pema talks about that the most is what keeps the old habit in place is when we feel that bit of movement to bring relief. And sometimes that relief is brought just by, you know, a judgment, right? Or just by reframing the moment to make it make sense to us. Things aren't going the way we want them to. So we tell ourselves some story about the moment, or somebody is, you know, being critical of us. And so we come back with our defense, and we may not even speak those things, right? But in our minds, we're defending against it. And it's that action that we take on it that feeds the habit. And she refers to it as a scratching, right? And the scratching is the worst thing we can do. I mean, think about a mosquito bite or an insect bite or something along those lines. And it's screaming at us to itch, to scratch. And the more we do that, the more it itches, right? It doesn't relieve it. For a brief second, it relieves it. But then it creates more of the same. When I first heard this teaching of Pema, she talked about scabies. She talked about it's a skin condition. And in the field I work in, I work in group homes, right? And we would have, and it's contagious, and we would have clients that picked up, kind of like lice, would pick up these scabies on their skin. And the doctors would say, they can't itch. They just can't touch it. And the more they would scratch it, the worse it would get, and the more miserable they would be. And so it, recognizing that not scratching that urge is what we need to do first and foremost, then we need to find tools to help us not scratch that itch. And I think how I really began to understand this for myself was in recovery. I got sober in late 80s, 88. And at that time, it was a very small group of folks. And we use, there's a document, there's a book, right? And it was written in the, mid 1930s, and pretty pure document for those of us that have, been around recovery circles, and we love it. And, and it's just different than a lot of the people that got sober later on went through treatment centers. And there's nothing to say about that other than it's a different approach, right? And the document that I got sober on, it talked much about the truth of addiction being, and it doesn't sugarcoat it at all, is that it is very much a spiritual malady. And it came out right out front and said that this is a spiritual issue. This is really not a mental issue. It's not really even a physical issue. And the main reason they came to that conclusion was because the medical profession had not been able to solve it at all. The psychology fields at the time weren't able to touch it either. They actually would refer to this urge, this itch, that guided alcoholism as beyond anything that they could touch. They didn't have an answer for it. But they stumbled upon these a couple of guys that discovered this spiritual solution to it. And the spiritual solution was beginning with, you don't scratch the itch, right? You don't take the drink. And I think sometimes in recovery circles, people come in, and when they realize that we're talking about 100% abstinence here, that we're not talking about learning how to control or manage it, but we are saying, you don't scratch the itch, right? You don't, you hear, we don't take the first drink, right? And the rest of recovery, the rest of it is, that is what we call our first step. And then the rest of it is learning how to sit with that discomfort of not taking that, not scratching that. And we have beautiful tools. We have, inventory tools, just the same stuff that we are shared here, that people share with us here in Awakening Together. It's a way of cultivating the pause in between that discomfort and healing it so we can be free of it. we talk in recovery circles about the causes and the conditions of this urge, right? This urge to medicate. And it is the same in this article. She talks about, the degrees that this hits us is, it can be a spot on a sweater. We go from a spot on a sweater creating this tension, creating this, basically, I wish I had another sweater on, right? Because I see that it's dirty. And so we want things to be different right then. And our insecurity gets fired off. And, oh my God, what if somebody sees this and thinks I'm a slob? And, all that stuff we do. So we start at something as simple and easy as that. And it goes all the way to this addiction, where she says, there are people, and this is the core of addiction, right, that are willing to give up their life to scratch that itch for a brief moment of reprieve, the smallest moment of reprieve. That's the amount of pain that we put ourselves in as we identify with all this stuff that we were never meant to attach to, our sense of who we are and all that stuff. And I remember one time hearing a gentleman talk about sobriety in this way. And he would talk about all the people that would have be kind of begging him to stay sober, to let go of the drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be. And, and all that, the guilt trips that go with that. If you loved me, you'd do this. And if you cared about yourself, you'd do this. And so all this, we call it frothy emotional appeal, right? So we're trying to, talk to these people and get them to see things our way. And, if you just wouldn't scratch that itch, you'd be okay. And he shared, all these people with their loving intention, no doubt. If they knew what it felt like right before I picked up that drink to scratch that itch, if they loved me, they would never ask me to sit in that. And I think that just speaks to the level. And I'm not saying that that level of pain is any more for an addict. I really don't believe that. I believe it's the human condition. That just is the way. That's just the way my path went. But I don't think there's any separation in that. But that's what we're dealing with, and it's subconscious, right? The urge and that need to scratch is, old habits that we, like the article said, we have been feeding and putting the grooves to for millennia. I mean, a long time. And so, she gives the urge and the request to cultivate this loving kindness that we talk about a lot around here, and how important that is, because this is not an overnight matter, right? This is stuff that we commit to the practice and the getting more comfortable with the ick and being willing more and more to sit in that sense of discomfort and pain, whatever form it takes, because it takes many, many forms. We learn to get really curious about what this all looks like on the inside for us, what our map is. Because it's one thing to think that you see what's triggering other people. And I make that mistake on a daily basis and try and fix my husband. I can name his shempa and I can tell him where he got off track, and it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter until you see what that looks like for you. and you get really good at kind of recognizing your own. It's your own matrix, right? It's your own. You know, in the movie What the Bleep, when they show all that stuff going on in the brain for all of us, and the pictures of the people, and you know, our own different firing off of chemicals that we like, our endorphins, all that stuff. We have our own little map and our own little plan, and that is why we need guidance. That I am reminded of that more and more all the time. That's why I need guidance. That's why I need the Holy Spirit, because I really don't know the way out of that matrix on my own, right? I built that. You know, I'm the one who built that with all of its defenses and all of its strategies and all of its imaginings about what's to bring me comfort. And on my own devices, left to my own devices, I go back to the old grooves. I go back to the old habits. I scratch, right? I need the Holy Spirit to be my calamine lotion, whatever that is, that pink stuff that we put all over ourselves. That's what the Holy Spirit can do, right? Can be a nice balm for that, can soften that itch. So we can have an opportunity to heal it. And that's all the work we're doing, right? Is to create a space, create some loving kindness, create some clarity so we can see it before we itch it. And what's beautiful about this article is, you know, she was pretty clear. There are times really when we don't even recognize it until long after the fact. Right? Long after my tantrum. And I go, oh my God, did you see that? And then sometimes I'm actually even conscious in the middle of the tantrum, but can't stop, right? It's like watching a movie, like, oh, now she's going to do this. And now she's going to say this, and she's going to wish she hadn't, but she's going to do it anyway. And, you know, and she says, even going back after the fact, and recreating this. And in 500 days, it's a beautiful practice that Regina has put in there to review emotional upset. And I think that's exactly what she's asking us to do, is we can go back after the fact. We can drum up the story. We can feel that. And it gives us an opportunity to practice catching it right before we scratch. And when we can do that, it's just truly like these little fish watching, swimming around that hook as she ended that. You know, the trick is not to get hooked, right? I mean, can you imagine fish talking about that? I mean, that's what a fish does, is it goes for a hook, and to have the clarity to go, no, not going to do it this time. I'm going to go, you know, find a real bug instead of this one that someone's trying to trick me with. So, so the trick is, don't chomp on the hook. And in that way, we get a chance to live another day, literally, and to free ourselves from this. I'll say this, and then I'll be done, and we'll have a little bit of a song, quiet down again. But I recognize that I am one to say, I've been doing this for, you know, like I said, I came into recovery, and I have not had to have a drink or a drug since the first day I walked in, which I'm so grateful for. And so that's going to be what it's over 30 years. It's going to be 33 years, I think. This July is my sobriety birthday. And so I'm always one to say, you know, I've been doing this for blah, 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 however long that I think I've been doing this. And I realize, and more I realize that doing this, right, is this work is really, it's not a pleasant work. It's hard work. And I don't sit in that hard work. And I certainly have not been sitting in that hard work for 33 years, right? It's like I was given this reminder about when I was taking swimming lessons as a kid and I wanted to be on the swim team, right? Because they had these really cute swimsuits and they had these cute boys with these nice arms that were swimmers. I wanted to be on the swim team. But I always put myself towards the shallow end. And I literally, and I'm ashamed to say it, I would walk and pretend to swim, right? Because I didn't want the responsibility of having to work on strengthening my legs, strengthening my arms, learning how to breathe. I didn't want to do that stuff. And so I pretended to swim. And did not make the swim team, of course. And eventually I learned how to swim. But that's the difference between really doing this work is if I had really wanted to do that, I'd have gotten in the deep end, right? And in the place where I had to learn how to kick, I had to learn how to strengthen my legs, I had to learn how to strengthen my arms, and I had to learn how to breathe and, stay afloat. So I am now willing to go to the deep end. That is what I'm trying to do now, to jump into the deep end, to jump into meditation. I'm doing these practices to jump into the feelings instead of all the ways I get out of it. And because I want to be free. I do want to be free. I know that is the truth for me. And I want that for all of us. And I'm reminded that God loves all of us as if there's one of us, because there is only one of us. And I would like to be able to see that and recognize that as the truth that it is. And in order to do that, I need to get in the deep end. So I think that is all I have to say about that right now. And so we are going to go to another song. And this one is Only Love by Winona. And this is the opportunity to donate to Awakening Together. If you feel guided to do that, we survive off donations. We keep ourselves afloat. So, right, it does look like we have a little bit of time for some open sharing. If anybody has anything to share. I want to once again thank Michelle for her reading. Appreciate it very much. Thanks, Sina, for doing my music for me, and all of you for showing up.
I'll share.
Thanks, Michelle.
So, there's all the addictions, and those are the people that have it right in their face. But then there's all the others. We're all doing the same thing, everybody. Whether it's, like she said, judgment, criticism, anytime we project out onto somebody or have a judgment about something, or, the feeling of this is, you need to change the situation. It's all, that's what it is that uncomfortable just being. I mean, you turn on the television and what do you see? The ads and everything. It's like, oh my goodness, they're really selling us all kinds of stuff to get out of being with whatever it is that we don't like in the moment.
Yeah.
So whether it's buying a new car or eating food or whatever, taking a medication or buying some new clothes, or there's just everything out there. in our world is that's what it's all about. So it's just people with addictions have it more in their face, where the rest of us are just kind of rest of everybody else is, well, that's not me. But really it is. We're addicted to our thoughts, right? Anyway, that's all I had.
Yes, very much. I think that is the final frontier, is that thinking addiction, for sure. That's where it's at. Sina?
Thank you for your homily, Kelly, and also Michelle, your beautiful reading. One of the most powerful practices I've been engaging in the last couple months, and it's called the Welcoming Meditation. It's a powerful practice in that when you sit down to meditate, in the time of your meditation, on your cushion, your couch, your chair, or wherever, every emotion is allowed. It's allowed to come in, it's allowed to go. And it's kind of like the loving all, but the way it is the welcoming attitude. It's almost like an attitudinal stance to all of these uncomfortable feelings that are just percolating there, waiting to be looked at, acknowledged, let move through the system. It's kind of like Rumi's poem where he talks about, the guest house and how we let the guest, but what's helpful in the welcoming meditation is remembering it's a guest. Because if it's a guest, yes, it's going to come, but yes, it's going to go. So in that, there is the relief from the incessant fear that would say, well, if I allow this emotion, if I allow this sensation, if I allow this feeling, well, maybe I'll be swallowed up by it. It'll be too big, too overwhelming, too much. That word too, T-O-O. And then when you start to practice, what I have noticed from my practice with this is little by little, you see it's true. It comes, it goes. It's like waves or undulations. Feelings come, feelings go, thoughts come, thoughts go. And what I've noticed is this softer, kinder way, a gentler way of being with myself in all emotions. So instead of harshly judging myself like I normally would for having a so-called negative emotion or what most people would call an uncomfortable sensation in the body, what is allowed is, okay, the question is, can I just welcome this? Can I be the open allowance, the open aware space for this uncomfortable sensation? And then you hold it gently. And then and something about that soft awareness allows it to be seen. And sometimes tears come. Sometimes there's a cleansing in that way. And sometimes you'll notice the tightness and it gets even tighter. And then it releases. So I just wanted to share that because it's been really a powerful practice that I've been using.
Beautiful. Thank you. I want to invite everybody to stay and continue in fellowship at 9:30. I'm not sure if George or Audrey's doing it today, but I'm sure Audrey is. Wonderful. That's awesome. All right. So let's do our closing song. And it is Let Your Soul Be Your Pilot by Sting, one of my favorite Sting songs. And love you all. Have a great day. Be free.
You've been watching our online gathering. It happens weekly on Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. To join us live in the sanctuary, visit our website, awakening-together.org. You'll want to click on Online Sanctuary in the main menu, and then in the drop-down menu, look for How to Enter the Sanctuary. Right there at the top of the page is a clickable link. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary and join with you in fellowship. Thank you again for watching. Also, please know that if you'd like to stay connected via the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube, you can subscribe and hit the bell for more notifications. We hope to see you in the sanctuary.